Hello.
Oh. Well, that's as good a way to open as any. I'm Ed Sciakey here today with two members of the Talking Heads and one of those members' sister, all to talk about the new group Tom Tom Club, or the new record Tom Tom Club, which is potentially the new group Tom Tom Club, or what is it? What's it all about? We have Tina Weymouth here from Talking Heads. Hello, Tina.
Hi, Ed.
And Tina's sister Laura is here.
Hi, Ed.
Hello. And Tina's husband Chris France is here.
Good afternoon, Ed.
And we're all here, and I'm a member of Tom Tom Club also. Actually, people know Chris and Tina from Talking Heads, of course. So that's probably a good place to start on our journey into the Tom Tom Club. Maybe we could go back a little bit to the early days of Talking Heads. Even before the first album, you people were a three-piece group with David Byrne. Isn't that how it all started?
Yeah, that was the beginning at Cibala Gibala's.
CBGB.
Yeah.
The famous CBG.
How did Talking Heads briefly get started back in those days? You want to, Tina?
Well, we were in college together, and we decided to move to New York after we graduated and start a band. And so we did shortly after we got there. Rehearsed for 6 months and started playing at CBGB's, and that was the beginning. We used to play there, I guess, a couple times a month for 2 years.
Whose idea was it, or was it a joint idea to really create that sound, which was really quite different, in fact, kind of defined, dare we use the term, new wave for a while?
Really, what happened was we didn't know what we were doing exactly. We just knew that our ideas were not exactly mainstream ideas in terms of what was happening in rock and roll. We're talking about 1975 now, and early 76. And we just evolved. Talking Heads evolved from being basically what people, one critic I remember said that we sounded like a bunch of kids that had been locked up in a closet with our Sam and Dave records for too long.
Was that true? Was Sam and Dave that kind of music?
Sam and Dave, we really did like that old rhythm and blues stuff, and but of course we also were really interested in New York underground music, like the Velvet Underground, and later sounds that later came out from artists like David Bowie and even people like Alice Cooper, which was Alice Cooper in a way was an inspiration for our famous underground hit Psycho Killer. But I guess that's beside the point.
So kind of people that were on the borderline of mainstream.
Yeah, we were interested in freaky people and unusual sounds and that type of thing, and that was what really primed us to that interest is what really primed us to make the kind of music that we did with Talking Heads and still do. And of
course, David Byrne's unusual vocals were kind of what people first noticed about Talking Heads. We should mention that Chris plays the drums in Talking Heads, and Tina, the perhaps unlikely bass player in the band. Unlikely in terms of what people saw when they first saw you. You were visually very unusual, as well as the sound of the band unusual, I think, a little bit. You got signed to make a record, I guess. Well, you made some singles first, right? You made some singles on your own?
We made one.
Oh,
we made Love Goes to a Building on Fire, backed with New Feeling.
Right.
And that was just a limited pressing, which helped us a bit in our first tour of Europe when we opened for the Ramones. That was a great tour. And then we came back, and by that time, Jerry was an assimilated member of the band, having been on the tour with us.
Jerry Harrison. Playing keyboards.
And guitar, and backup vocals. And he played with us on our record when we came back from that tour, which was Talking Heads 77. And that was kind of a pop record. That was our attitude at the time, that we wanted to make pop songs that were somewhere between the mainstream kind of pop and the freaky or kind of sounds that were coming out, like Chris described, David Bowie and Roxy Music and those people.
And this is kind of indicative of that from Talking Heads 77, Uh-Oh, Love Comes to Town. Classic Uh-Oh, Love Comes to Town from Talking Heads 77. And we're speaking with Chris France and Tina Weymouth of Talking Heads and Laura Weymouth, now all of the new project, Tom Club. We're talking about Talking Heads in the early days there. There was a kind of that, strangeness about the whole thing that went with that whole new wave movement. And yet, as you mentioned, really, the songs were just basically pop songs. And when I saw you perform live, I thought, well, this is a nice, good, great rock and roll band. There isn't anything really that weird that should somehow keep it away from a mainstream audience. And yet there was a kind of almost deliberate new wave image that was being put forth. I mean, did you feel that kind of contradiction?
I think we were being used to sell other people at the time. That we were the only band that was called New Wave that was on tour at the time, and there were a lot of other groups that were putting out records on our label but that weren't touring, and so they packaged a special little, do you remember a little 7-inch single that they gave away at the record stores? It was called New Wave, and it had a really bad cover, and it had Richard Hell and the Voidoids and the Dead Boys, and you
had Bugs Bunny as a spokesman for the New Wave.
Yeah, I think that was part of Warner Brothers.
Those were the days.
But so I think that's why we got used and put in that market, even though we didn't really think we were New Wave. We thought we were trying to, to be in the big league. We weren't trying to start a new wave. That related more to films from our point of view.
There was a kind of an idea among some of the, quote, new wave bands that they didn't want to be accepted by the mainstream. That was somehow bad and selling out, and they were content to just play in the small clubs in New York and be underground and that kind of thing. And you obviously wanted to reach more people and get out and play, as you did.
Yeah, I think people said that. They didn't mean it. Even Robert Fripp and Brian Eno would love to get played on the radio. You know, I think that's everybody's dream, you know. The biggest thrill you can get is to hear your song on the radio. And I think that's just a self-defensive kind of thing to do, is say, I don't care. You know, we don't care if it's art, and we don't care if anybody doesn't like it. We're only interested in appealing to ourselves, which really does... I think it does mess some people up, that attitude, because it's very defiant, which is good on stage when you are playing live. But a lot of these people weren't really touring or going anywhere, and it was hard for them to back themselves up, especially, you know, like a group like the Police, who now really are, you know, right in that mainstream of pop music, and I remember when they used to be dressed as paratroopers and I don't think that they ever said they didn't want to be mainstream, but I think that it was just expected that because they came out of New Wave that they were like that, and it wasn't true. And we weren't like that either. We weren't aggressive.
You didn't have an attitude like that, like you were saying, an aggressive attitude or defiant or, you know, attitude on stage. It wasn't like that. It was really good natured.
We just didn't really feel that way.
Yeah.
So we didn't act that way.
Well, David actually portrayed a kind of a slightly withdrawn nature on stage at the beginning, kind of, you know, self-contained strangeness, you know.
Yeah,
David
well, that's the way David always has been.
But that was part of the appeal.
Yeah, but it wasn't done as a gimmick, was it?
No,
it was. I think we were always amazed when David did as well as he did in front of people, because let's face it, even normal people get really shy on stage.
Well, your background was art, all of you really, wasn't it?
Yes, our background was painting and design and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Although we all had
Fine
played
art.
music. We had played a lot of music.
Music went hand in hand with the
I see.
art.
Were you, Chris and Tina, together before the band formed, or did you get together as a result of
No,
being
we
in the
actually
band?
we shared a studio, a painting studio before the band, and Psycho Killer was written in our painting studio. David came over one day and said, I'm looking for lyrics, and so we co-wrote that song together, and then later put it to music.
Yeah. Had you played drums and bass before that?
I hadn't played bass. I'd played guitar and various instruments, but Chris had been playing drums in rock and roll bands ever since he was 12.
It's kind of remarkable that you picked up the bass and played it so well so quickly, isn't it?
Thanks.
Yeah.
But
well, it is.
I played it guitar style, but I just stuck to simple parts that I could play perfectly.
You also took on a kind of a masculine type appearance in those days, didn't you? It was kind of
well, I
deliberately.
dressed as a boy, and I had my hair cut very short, and that was kind of, you know, to ease things with David, because people would shout out, Tina, Tina, you know, and it embarrassed me, and it embarrassed David, because after all, he was the focal point, he was our front man, and you know, it was either I would have to leave the band or tone down my image, get low profile, and sneak my way in there.
The fact that you were a girl was the point here.
It's easier for girls, yeah.
But it was a distraction in a sense. You were
Well,
the girl
I don't think
in the
I was
band.
distracting, because I didn't wear distracting clothing or move in a
but you could have
distracting
been.
style.
Yeah.
But it was true that I even noticed it at the time. It's easier to talk about these things in retrospect, but I remember consciously, being conscious of it and asking David to cut my hair for me. I figured that would make him feel a lot better.
And later, including now, you've let your hair grow longer. And the last time I saw you with the Talking Heads, you were wearing a dress that you'd made yourself.
Yeah, I was in drag, right.
Right. And you told me that it was like, it was definitely a change, and sort of, it was time to change that, and you didn't have to pretend not to be a woman.
Yeah, but I was really heavily made up, and I was wearing these sort of gowns, and so it was really it was perverse, because it was the opposite extreme. I'd been this girl dressed looking like a boy for so long, and now I was like a boy in girl clothing.
This is probably a good time to ask Tina's sister Laura to step in and just tell. Were you a little bit surprised? I mean, was this unusual for Tina when she cut her hair off and took on a sort of masculine appearance in those days? Was it surprising in light of, you've probably known her a long time, I would think.
Yes. No, she was always a toughie, so it didn't really surprise me, you know, because when we were kids we played a lot of cowboys and Indians, and we were always cowboys, so it wasn't surprising at all.
Mm-hmm. What's the difference in your ages, the two of you?
7 years.
7 years. How does it fit? You have two other sister. You have another sister and a brother, right?
There's 6 girls and 2 boys, actually.
6 girls and 2 boys. And how do you fit in?
Nice family.
I'm number 3. Laura's number 7.
Ah.
Lorik, who contributed some lyrics to Booming and Zooming, is number 8. And Lonnie, who's the other tom-tom girl who sings, is number 5. Yes.
I see. So were you two close when you were growing up? Were you 7 years ahead? I guess it was a considerable time span.
Yeah, we've always been close.
Well, that's nice. We're going to do a song from the second Talking Heads album, which is was the first time you sang on a Heads record, right?
Right, Tina and the Typing Pool.
And it was a song called "The Good Thing." Did you? I don't know who wrote that. Check who
David wrote that one, and he wanted to have a chorus in a background chorus that gave the impression of kind of Chinese girls at work singing a work song, because he thought of it as a kind of a Chinese political song.
The Good Thing, for more songs about buildings and food. My Talking Heads. Good Thing. Talking Heads for more songs about buildings and food. More with Chris France and Tina Weymouth of Talking Heads, and the new project, Tom Tom Club. We talk about Talking Heads just by way of giving people a little bit of background on what you've been doing, and perhaps they haven't really heard a lot of this stuff about Talking Heads. There is still a Talking Heads.
Yes.
As of now, yes.
Always was.
Have no fear. Okay. There's I really thought we ought to maybe see a little bit of a transition from Talking Heads into the Tom Tom Club album, and really probably Air struck me as the track maybe that did it foretell the change, or was it, how do you see that? Was it kind of a leaning in that direction, or? It was just
the first time that Lonnie and Laura sang on backups with me on a Talking Heads record, or on any record together.
And how about the sound of it, sort of that?
It's kind of our sound, yeah.
Yeah. It was called the Sweet Breath sound at the time. Yeah. But now it's just the Tom Tom Club sound.
Well, but it evolved as part of the Talking Heads music, or
that's right. Well, we were recording this record, Fear of Music,
which was the third Talking Heads.
We had the song called Air, which everybody in the group agreed lent itself to a sweet backing vocal, and so Tina called in her two sisters, and that was that. We recorded this song.
And it was my favorite from Fear of Music, Talking Heads, Air. from Fear of Music by Talking Heads. That's Air, and a collaborative effort there among the band with lyrics by David Byrne. This was the third Talking Heads LP, and there was a kind of a change in store on the next one, which was to come with a change of influence. You want to tell us a little bit about how that happened? The fourth album, Remain in Light, really kind of a change.
Well, it wasn't a really big change until after we went on tour, but I think that it was the first time that we wrote songs in the studio.
We're leading up to another song here, Once in a Lifetime.
Which was a nice hit for everyone.
Yeah, it was a big hit in England for us.
Great song.
And it also was the first time we worked with a young Jamaican engineer named Stephen Stanley, who in turn is co-producing the Tom Tom Club with us.
Right. So let's do Once in a Lifetime. This is from Fear of Music, rather from Remain in Light here, the fourth Talking Heads LP.
That's right.
You may find yourself living in a shotgun shack, and you may find yourself in another part of the world, and you may find yourself behind the wheel of a large automobile, and you may find yourself in a beautiful house with a beautiful wife, and you may ask yourself, well, how did I get here? Letting the days go by, let the water hold me down. Letting the days go by, water flowing underground into the blue again. After the money's gone, once in a lifetime, water flowing underground. And you may ask yourself, how do I work this? And you may ask yourself, where is that large automobile? And you may tell yourself, this is not my beautiful house. And you may tell yourself, this is not my beautiful wife. Letting the days go by, let the water hold me down. Letting the days go by, water flowing underground into the blue again. After the money's gone, once in a lifetime, water flowing underground. Same as it ever was, 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 same as it ever was. Water dissolving and water removing. There is water at the bottom of the ocean. Under the water, carry the water. Remove water at the bottom of the ocean. Water dissolving and water removing. Letting the days go by, let the water hold me down. Letting the days go by, water flowing underground into the blue again, into the silent water, under the rocks and stones. There is water underground. Letting the days go by, let the water hold me down. Letting the days go by, water flowing underground into the blue again. After the body's gone, once in a lifetime, water flowing underground. You may ask yourself, what is that beautiful house? You may ask yourself, where does that highway go to? And you may ask yourself, am I right? Am I wrong? And you may say to yourself, my God, what have I done? Letting the days go by, let the water hold me down. Letting the days go by, water flowing underground into the blue again, into the silent water, under the rocks and stones.
Ed Sciakey here talking with Chris France and Tina Weymouth of Talking Heads and the Tom Tom Club. And Tina's sister, Laura, is also here with us. We might just mention the business of disco and new wave and so on, because you started out at Talking Heads branded as new wave, as we've discussed, and there's a sort of a disco or whatever, that rhythm or whatever influence really on there. And of course, as we go into talking about the Tom Tom Club, there is that influence. Can you talk a little bit about the way the two terms maybe were misused and then sort of merged, and what it was all about, how you saw it?
Yeah, well, I think in the early 70s there was some good dance music that was being made by various people. James Brown, of course, and George McRae and people like that. And it got to have the name disco because it was the kind of music that got exclusively played in discotheques, and it had that tough 4/4 beat of the kick drum, and it had that hi-hat sound and funky bass, and it was dance music. And I think that what's happened is it's come full circle, that it's finally caught up that people always was. It was dance music. But there was an annoying thing that happened in the mid-70s to disco, and that's why you had that thing happening with Disco Sucks and all that. And that was that they weren't being made by real groups, the disco records at that time. They were being made by session men and session players, and so there was a backlash by musicians that did go on tour and people who did work real hard, to say, oh, this isn't real music, this disco stuff is a drag, and it was so imitated and so badly done for such a long time that it took until now for people to realize that there were some good dance elements in it, and that these rhythms could, were really, it's just fast R&B is what it is. It's just speeded up and without the blues element.
And it sort of created a cliche in a sense, didn't it?
It did.
Well, you maybe we should go back to in the story of Talking Heads into Tom Tom Club. So you did the fourth album. You did the tour with the additional musicians.
What happened after this big tour was that everybody was pretty exhausted, and that happens on tours. And we took a sabbatical from Talking Heads, you might say, and David went into this Twyla Tharp dance thing, and he did the music for her choreography, which was on Broadway. Jerry went out to L.A. to make his solo record, and we went down to the studio where Talking Heads had worked before in the Bahamas and did this project, which we call the Tom Tom Club.
Well, we did a single first, and due to the success, that was Wordy Rapping Hood. That was successful in Europe.
It was #1 in 3 countries, which is a big shocker for us.
And it was only more recently released here in America. We should run down, I guess, of course, Chris on drums and vocals, Tina on bass and keyboards also, and some vocals, and then we have Laura, of course, who's with us here on vocals, and Lonnie, your other sister, Lonnie Weymouth, and then Adrian Ballou on guitar. I guess he wasn't on this track, or
no, he wasn't on that one because it was made before he came.
Right. Monty Brown on guitar, Tyrone Downey on keyboards, Sticky on percussion, helping you out, I guess, Chris, and Stevie on keyboards and engineer. That's Stephen Stanley, that's right. Guy we mentioned who engineered that track that we heard Once in a Lifetime. So there sets up the personnel, and here is Wordy Rapping Hood, Tom Tom Club.
in papers, words in books, words on TV, words for crooks, words of comfort, words of peace, words to make the fighting cease, words to tell you what to do. Words are working hard for you. Eat your words, but don't go hungry. Words have always nearly hung me.
Words of nuance, words of skill, and words of romance are a pill. Words are stupid, words are fun. Words can put you on the run. Mots pressés, mots sensés, mots qui disent la vérité. Mots maudits, mots mentis, mots qui manquent le fruit d'esprit. Can make you pay and pay for letter words I cannot say. Words are trouble, words are subtle, words of anger, words of hate, words over here, words out there, in the air and everywhere. Words of wisdom, words of strife, words that write the book I like. Words won't find the right solution to the planet Earth's pollution. Say the right word, make a million. Words are like a certain person who can't say what they mean, don't mean what they say. It up for the common good. Let us enlist the neighborhood.
It's okay. I've overstood. This is a wordy rapping hood. Okay, bye. What's a
Wordy Rapping Hood from the Tom Tom Club album, which is just called Tom Tom Club. And Ed Sciakey here speaking with Chris France and Tina Weymouth of Tom Tom Club and Laura Weymouth. Chris and Tina, members of Talking Heads, lo these many years. Why, dating back to the mid-'70s, practically.
All the way back.
Old-timers in this changing world, I guess. The rap thing is kind of a dance-oriented thing, basically, rhythm.
I think so.
Yeah, yeah. And,
It's got a street orientation. It's kind of presents the idea that anyone can participate.
It's kind of funny, too. There's some humor.
Yeah, there's a lot of humor, and the whole idea
it's almost always very tongue-in-cheek. I mean,
Yeah.
let's face it, you can't get too serious when you're
How did
talking that fast.
How did that track start? It started as a rhythm track? Just
It started with drums, and then we put the bass on, and then we put the guitar on, and then we put the voices on. It was really very spontaneous.
Okay, then here are the members of the Tom Tom Club performing on their new album, On. The album is kind of different. Side 2 kind of has a different feel than Side 1. That song being from Side 2, and we can do another one called Lorelei, which precedes it on the album, and this features Laura as well as Tina. will we see another Tom Club album if this album is successful, or will we see something
I think
completely different?
We will, yes.
Oh.
I think we're going to make another one about a year after we made this one.
I
so
see.
Next fall, you should be looking forward to Tom 2.
Okay. Well, thanks for being with us today, Chris France and Tina Weymouth and Laura Weymouth. Thank you for being with us.
Always a pleasure.
And give our best to Jerry and David.